Hey, welcome to Kaisers Kastle tonight. Take a seat on my big orange couch. Tonight, I have a fun show to do on conspiracy theories versus an actual conspiracy. And for that, I can think of no better co-host on this one than Georgios Pardos. You guys have heard us many times. Good times every time. And he's been a friend from my youth. So how you doing out there, Georgios? Been doing well? How was the holidays?
I'm doing fine. Just can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Everything's going
It
5 by 5.
it was actually a very decent holiday, and we had a very good day, and it just was, it was uneventful, and as you get older, uneventful is good.
Yes, indeed it is. And that's kind of the topic matter that we're discussing is how it is good as you get older and you realize the difference between a conspiracy theory and a actual conspiracy, right?
Pretty much.
So, what's your favorite conspiracy theory that turned out to be conspiracy fact? Just to start this show off, I'll let you lead, brother.
My favorite one I'd tell you the favorite one that turned out to be true. Wow. I got to think about that. I think the Wannsee Conference is probably my favorite conspiracy.
Yeah, that's a good one, but what about the Vegas shooting? You and I did 2 videos and a show on that, and everything we said ended up being true. Think back to it, brother.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think the Vegas shooting is probably up there. It's got to be in the top 5. Um, I think part of it is I think the conspiracy is part of it. I tell you one that hit close to home is the metals conspiracy about when the central banks moved to regulate prices. That one turned out to be pretty true, and I didn't think that that has been one of mine, and that's because it's in the the metals, the recycling business has turned out to be true, and it was just too coincidental that there was price fixing, but that turned out to be true. I think that those are kind of the ones
I remember that conspiracy because that actually was a conspiracy, and at that time I was giving you a hand at the shop, right?
right, yeah, and that turned out to be so. What they did was central banks around the world turned out to basically they turn out to regulate. It was an inside trading basically, and so that there's a guy by the name of David Morgan, and that show that metal prices were controlled by the central banks, and that was that just was one of those issues that nobody thought was going to be there, but Goldman Sachs was in on it, and I think that is one of those things that you just don't think that the global central banks are manipulating gold, and it's not just gold, it's silver, it's palladium, it's platinum, it's all of those ones, and they in November of last year, which is kind of hard, but basically 2 months ago, and a JP Morgan trader was found or pled guilty to manipulating metal prices. And what people don't understand about this is that when things don't sound right, this is one of the things that me and you have discussed over and over again. When you're in a field, and it doesn't matter what field it is, when something doesn't sound right, that's triggered. That no. There's no way you can tell me that. If somebody tells you they're 30 years old with 15 black belts in Wing Chun Fu and all that, no, that doesn't sound right because you didn't have time. When you're telling me that the index price of a metal is only X amount above mining cost, that doesn't sound right to us. And it's just like the Vegas shooting. When you're telling me this old guy got markers at a hotel, and he got markers equating him to $1 million in income. That doesn't sound right. So people always, two things about a conspiracy. When things don't sound right, there's no such thing as coincidence. Can we agree on that?
Oh, yeah. If they don't sound right, it's not right. And that's always the way it is. And you and I have had deep discussions on this, sometimes yelling discussions in the beginning, because some of the things that I said you disagreed with. But in the end, I think there was some common ground reached, right?
Right. And here's one of the other things that too is that I always look at, and here's the thing that me and you've disagreed on. And part of it is being, that sometimes that you also don't, you have a tendency not to look at the monetary side, which is fine. And that's one of the things, but I always go back to it. You can't pull off a conspiracy.
And that's why I always bring you on for monetary. I do not go into the monetary. I allow you to, because you can free flow that like a rap star, brother.
And here's one of the things that I always say. You can't 9 out of 10 times, and you can't pull off a conspiracy without having a banker and an accountant, because there's money involved. Now, every once in a while, I will concede this point. There's some conspiracies that go on that don't involve money, that are just either
usually familial, something to do with families or tribe or close associates and friends, and those conspiracies usually have to do with either
relationships. Usually, it's relationships.
Yes,
it's relationships, or there's something personal. You got the babysitter pregnant, and all of a sudden you're trying to figure out how not to let your stockholders know that you got the babysitter pregnant, because that's going to harm. Those kind of things. Normally, if your wife finds out you're having an affair with the secretary, that's not always, that doesn't have, monetary attachment to it. You don't need a banker and accountant to do that. Now, in other situations, when John DeLorean, let's use a prime example. John DeLorean had when he got busted, with coke, he had an accountant and a banker already set up to not only funnel the drug profits, but to get him the cash in order to buy the cocaine to resell to fund his company. So 9 out of 10 times it's about money. In this world, you can't pull off a conspiracy without having a monetary trail. And that is I think it's the one problem where conspiracies fall apart with people, is they don't look at the money because they don't understand it. They don't understand that you've got to, who paid for it. That's the thing. Where did the money come from? What slush fund did you pay the builder or, the building code, representative for the city to get the permits approved? I mean, there's always a money trail.
That's the entire thing, I think, that's so interesting. When we have our conversations, Georgios and I have these conversations. The one thing I know as a former investigator and, cop and, military policeman, different things I've done, the one thing that always holds true is there's always a paper trail. And notice how much China is leading the way now. And Georgios does business with numerous foreign nations for his business. He can shout out his business if he wants. I'm not going to do it. But what I will say, the one thing that always holds true is there's always a paper trail with money now, especially because they want you to do business with debit cards. They want you to get into a program with a phone. All these things, remember, all this stuff leaves a trail. It doesn't make it harder for the cops. The cops can just follow your name and follow everything about you with your social security number. And that was something that when Social Security was established, I guess it's kind of a conspiracy. Everybody was worried about it being the mark of the beast. It's not the mark of the beast, but what it is a way to track you, your funds, and everything else. And what's your thoughts?
Well, I think that that's one of the things that that people didn't realize was how easy, how easy it became to track somebody. And let me give you a prime example of what I was telling you about the money. Okay. Do you remember there was a representative in Louisiana by the name of William Jefferson? Now, he had $90,000.
William the Freezer Jefferson.
Right. Now, the reason he put that in his freezer, the 90,000, and that was from payoffs, is he couldn't run that money through his account. And why is that? Well, because here's one of the things that when you are doing a bribery, when you're doing a scam, when you're doing something like that. I met today with a banker, and in order for me to get a loan from the bank to buy a house because I'm self-employed, I have to have 2 years tax returns and something called a Schedule K. Now, that is a process, that's a pattern, and they can tell a bank has certain formulas and algorithms that they can tell where does that money come from. It's for, basically, it follows a pattern. Well, if I handed you $90,000 cash and you went to deposit it tomorrow, and you've never done that before, that's going to send off, warnings. And the problem with when you start talking with people, with normal everyday, the layman out there, Joey the plumber, most people don't understand once it gets to what we call outliers, the top 1%. Everybody can understand for the most part. Yeah, the average American makes what? Median income in America is what? $59,800. They can understand that. But when you talk about somebody making 500 or 600,000, most people don't understand that. So they pay more in taxes than what you make. So it's a very difficult thing. The other thing is that why conspiracy theories abound is because people lack, I'm going to say they lack critical thinking anymore. And I think that that's one of the reasons why theories like the flat earth, or I don't know, some of the crazy ones, a sovereign citizen, those kind of theories are just absurd. But we didn't land on the moon. Those are the kind of things that people flock to when they don't understand critical thinking.
I would wholeheartedly agree. The thing that boggles the mind when people actually think of it is Happy New Year, Jermaine Arminius and Val. They both are on the page right now typing. You know how that goes. People will type and I'll answer. Critical thinking, this is something people don't realize. Georgios and I, we're separated by a few years in high school, but that's it. Our families have been friends for years,
Right.
This is the thing. Kings tremble over men who have a boyhood friendship. That's a fact. We both know this. So, but the difference being is, with him saying what he was saying, it is a very, how do I put this? It's a very cognizant thing when you do business going overseas. There's a legitimate way to do it and an illegitimate way. And the people who do it the illegitimate way, 99 times out of 10, or I guess 100, they're going to get caught. And it's because they're morons, because you do everything legitimately. You should. That's it. We have to pay our taxes. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think part of it is that the fact that that people I think part of the I think part of the problem is that people lack understanding, more than a cursory understanding of a subject. And so, and can we, I don't know who I want to make fun of. I want to make fun of the Chris Costa C-Grip guys out there that are going to go like, well, man, I'm going to walk into combat with, 40 magazines and, no, you're not. You haven't done that. You may be able to carry 8 to 10 magazines at tops, but they gear out. It's like that, the one day that you were talking about where you trick out your rifle where it weighs 24 pounds, which is the same as a M60. I mean, those are the,
right. It's ridiculousness, but everybody buys into it because they want to be tactic cool.
Right. And so one of the things that happens is that a lot of people start commenting on it. I'll give you a prime example. Let me use this. And I got into an argument with some people online about a page on this argument about the wrestler in New Jersey that had to cut his hair in order to compete. Now, I've been wrestling since 1982. And I said, and their only argument about the ref was that he was racist. Okay. And I said, well, here's the thing. Maybe he was. I don't know his history. You don't know his history. But if the kid had followed the rules, there's nothing for the ref to admonish him on. The kid was wearing a Nike beanie, and I had to look this up. He was wearing a Nike beanie. And somebody posted a picture in one of the threads of a hair cover. Well, it's not regulation. And then they posted a picture of Ben Askren, who's in college, and a kid who's in high school. So when people don't know the technicalities, they start filling in with what they think is true, and that happens.
Too right, brother. Too right.
And you think about that, they look at, if you take a look at some of the stuff that we learned at Fort McClellan, okay, little things, the little things are, you look at what basically equals to the totality of circumstances. You never take anything for granted, and it's the same thing at the School of Infantry, and they teach you this all the time. You learn the basics. You don't turn over anything for coincidence. Oh, that looks funny, or you don't do that. It's those are the things that get you dead. And I think a lot of the problems is that people want to feel a certain way about a subject. And it doesn't matter the subject. It doesn't matter whether it's money laundering or drug.
Well, the feels are what will hang you. I mean, here's the thing. You do everything in public. I never minded, and there's another guy that will be on sometime soon, hopefully, who feels the same way. You do everything in public, in the open. You don't wear a mask. There are times that things have to happen, militarily or whatever. But other than that, you're open to everything because you are going to handle business correctly. And the problem that I see, and I want your opinion on this, on how conspiracy theory, you and I have plotted to make a ham and cheese sandwich. You're going to bring the ham, I'm going to bring the cheese. We'll both buy the bread together, and once we start assembling it, now it ceased to become a conspiracy theory or something that people have heard over the internet or the interwebs. However, we have now become conspirators to build that ham and cheese sandwich. And that's the rub that a lot of people don't understand. There is a time that when it can be proven that it is a factual conspiracy. And
but here's an argument that we had. Okay. I had, and I want to break this down to you because this is where they were talking about this. Me and you plan on robbing a bank, okay? We sit down, we have a couple beers. We plan on robbing a bank. We decide that we
This is
want
hypothetical. I have to say
right.
that, George, because we've never done that. So
Yeah, I know. But even and here's the thing: even if we sat down, planned to rob a bank, went into a bank, and even surveyed the bank, and I had a judge and I had an Arizona district judge on one of my shows, and he explained this, and I was basically dumbfounded. He said, until you actually act on it, with the exception of there's a couple exceptions, right. And one of them is murder. The conspiracy to commit murder is one of them, but
yes, because you want to stop the murder act. I get it,
right? But one of the things he said is that you can sit down and talk, talk about pulling off a bank robbery, but until you actually carry that out, there is no crime being committed. And that's very difficult for people to understand, because they're like, well, they planned it. Yes, of course they did. They planned it, and they planned it. They did all this. Yes, sure they did, but they didn't act on it. And so the mens rea wasn't there. So it's very difficult for people to carry out. Now, and I will put it to you the way that me and you have agreed on this a few times. You can forgive stupidity, you can't forgive evil. And that's, I think, what people
exactly. And that is what even the justice system has forgotten, that there is such a thing as evil. They don't want Americans to wake up, or in the West, period. They don't want you to realize there are people that have evil and intent in their heart. Their mens rea exist to do bad shit. And that's a factual thing. What Giorgio's just said, folks, that's the key.
And here's the thing with conspiracies. I mean, you take a look at, I'll give you a prime example with, when you were talking about conspiracies. Sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. But here's one of the problems with a conspiracy. It's hard enough for one person to keep a secret. But it's even harder when you have to include 20, 25 people to keep a secret. That's when they start falling apart, because,
or even two people. I mean, think about it. If all of a sudden you and I come up with some conspiracy, we're deviating from conspiracy theory to conspiracy. But this is important. Even two people. One person can always flip. And that's what I think people don't understand, is it is impossible to keep a conspiracy unless you have something to hang over the other person's head, i.e., in the government with the SES, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, which Georgios and I both know the machinations of this. These fuckers get pedophilia, all kinds of shit hung over their head. And that's how they keep a secret in the government. That's my 2 cents. And what's your thought?
Well, here's one of the things is that when we talked about this before, when people try to make outliers normal, and they try to make when they try to make the outliers to be normal, and that's where you run into a lot of problems. And I'll give you a prime example. Because this hit home with me, but Dennis Hastert, who is the Speaker of the House, was raping boys. Now, this is a wrestling coach. This is a guy that's entrusted with, the quality of life of kids under his care. And he was raping them. And the problem I have with that is that he didn't just rape them, he covered it up, because he had to pay, there were some people that he paid off, there's some people that he lied about, But I mean, here's the problem. In doing so, it diluted the system, and it wasn't just. And that is what that is the one problem I had with them, is that they are, when they do crazy shit like that, it really bothers me. Because I mean, that was a, whatever you want to call it, that was a, I don't know, whatever you want to say it, that was a conspiracy.
Yes, it truly was. And that's the thing that so sickens me. I mean, Georgios, you have a book. If you want to pimp it, you can, completely on my show, because we're brothers. But the thing about Hastert, everybody always forgets about Barney Frank when they were going to censure him. And he stood up there because his boyfriend was running a brothel with underage minor children. And everybody was like, oh, we're going to get him. We're going to go after him. And he said, if I go down, it's on C-SPAN. You guys can all see it. You're all going down. Because this is why the neocons and the neo-progressives or the neoliberals, whatever you want to call them, they're all in the pocket of one tribe, because they had no moral ability to not do what's right. I mean, who would want to ruin... Here's the thing about pedophilia that really disturbs me and disgusts me, and I know it does you too, George. You're ruining a child for life. I don't know how that does not get the life term for prison, because there is no rehabilitation for that sickness, that mental sickness. And honestly, I think it should get the death penalty, but that's my own opinion, and I'm the foremost expert on my opinion, brother. But what I will say is, you don't get to do that to people, especially, the point being is we should...
They hid that, but what I'm saying is that...
We should be wanting our youth to be better than us, and I know your son and my son, we do want that. And mentoring, too, is the same way, but somehow there's some perverse sexuality to it that I don't understand, and I don't want to delve into that.
Right, but think about it. But going back to what started this, Dennis Hastert and them all had, what do you call it? They all, I mean, in order to hide it, they had to conspire all sorts of ways to keep it hidden, to keep them from the victims from coming forward, to pay for them. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. And so when people are sitting there talking about,
back to the money, you already explained the money, and that's what was Hastert's undoing, paying off the kids he diddled. And I'm sorry, man. You were very correct on that. Me and you talked about this offline. We never talked about it publicly. But quiet money, that shit's stupid. And threatening people's family, shit. Let me think and find out that some fucker did that to my kid or your kid, because you're my brother. There would be a quiet conspiracy. You don't have to say a fucking word to me. That person,
right? And here's the, here is the, the issue with that. That they did it systematically, and they did it systematically because, again, it wasn't one of these situations that they didn't know. And the problem with these dialogues, right? The problem with these dialogues is also, I'm going to say this, and I hope it comes out in context. When a conspiracy comes out, some of it is so damn crazy that you just can't believe it. I mean, that is how crazy it is. That it just comes, it comes out so crazy that you're like, no. I mean, do you understand what I mean? Do you understand what I mean by that? That it's just like people can't even.
Yeah, I understand completely. I mean, we've got people in the chat, just with that conspiracy, and it is a real conspiracy, but the conspiracy theory, they wanted to poop on Alex Jones. I'm really editing myself tonight.
Right.
They wanted,
but you take a look at this. Can we talk about one that you've covered before?
Yeah.
The Lavon affair in Egypt in 1954. When you tell people about this, when you tell people about this, they are so crazy about this. They're like, no, this couldn't have. No, this couldn't have happened.
Well, I'll tell you this, brother. Lavon.
No, the Lavon affair was the false flag in the 54.
I understand this. That entire thing, if you mention it, you're anti-Semitic. You're
right.
Talking about things that, you're anti-Semitic and you're anti-Jew. You and I both know Jews. You and I both have friends who are Jews. We don't give a fuck about those. Are just normal, regular Jews. But the problem is, the people who conspired happen to be Jews, just like the communists. But hey, guess what? Can't bring that up, George. You can't, and I can't either. You know, we're the goyim.
Right. Well, and here's the problem behind it is the fact that you have people out there that think that because you're critical of something, you're anti something, and that's one of the that is a technique that has been used recently that really bothers me. That you cannot
anti-Semitic. Think about this, Georgios. You and I have lived in Semitic countries, worked with Semitic peoples to help them, either to destabilize, restabilize, whatever. It matters not. And I don't know about you. Actually, I do know about you. I just don't want to say it. You'll have to explain it to other people because I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I know that you and I are on the same track. We never hated anybody for their religion, their race. There was never hatred. But if somebody from a different religion, a different race, brought hatred or evil to us, that changes the game. And it's a real thing. And I guess we're definitely going off track of what I wanted to talk about, but I will let you finish that comment and tell people what your thoughts are. But we'll get back to conspiracy versus conspiracy theory.
Well, here's the thing about that. This is what I go back to and talk about. The conspiracy theories usually those rise from the people. I rarely see a conspiracy theory rise from people that are not experts.
Those that have not been there and done that, brother.
Right. And here's the thing. When people are experts on something and they come out and say, listen, when you see the people that are critical of something, like Jesse Ventura, he's been critical of a lot of things, and he's been right on a lot of things. And when people says about having a false flag, nobody, like, wait a second, the government would never, the government would never have a false flag. The CIA would never.
Fuck, George, you and I know better. We both executed false flags for these fucks. But
here's the thing.
Where's your award? Where's your
Right.
Where's your wreath going around your head, saying you're the man? And I didn't work for the CIA. You know who I worked for.
Right,
And all
but
this
I'm saying that
bullshit.
these guys are also, what I'm saying by that is, they, when you start talking about, when you start talking about the conspiracy theories and the people that are coming out and saying this, oh my God, they're like, wait a second, you're they don't believe you. And usually if somebody is critical of something and they say, wait a second, I've done this before, that doesn't sound right. And most people, let's say, dismiss it because they don't understand it either. And I don't know how to put it more simpler than that. They take a look at, they look at something because
your point is simple because it is a simple thesis. Most humans do not look at other people in ways other than disgust if they're dirtbags. Honestly, bringing shitty ethos or morals to their country or their place, or people who respect what's going on. And so your point is very clear, Georgios. That's why I bring you on, brother.
And here's another, let's talk about this for a second. One of the things that when you look at it, when you talk about something with the average American, right? And I don't know if this is correct, and you can, you've worked in agencies that would know this better, but the average American, I from what I've heard, lives within 60 miles of his birthplace, has only 17 or 18% of all Americans have traveled outside of the U.S. I think they've been to less than 5 states. I mean, they have a very limited view of the world.
Very true.
Now, I don't know. I mean, these are numbers that I've heard. I don't know if all of them are exact, but very few Americans have seen what outside of the USA looks like. So their view on the world is very different. And less than 3% of all Americans have ever served in the military. It's when you start talking about, like I said, I talk about outliers, which are the small, once you start getting to the small percentages of any population, it doesn't matter what they've done, it's very hard for normal people to understand that. And I think that is one of the reasons why we have so many problems today.
There's an important thing that was just brought up. Cold Warrior brought it up. He said, I live 14 miles from where I was born. Cold Warrior's a good guy. You would love him. He's a really great guy. Here's the thing about it. He lives 14 miles from where I came from. How many miles do I live from where I came from, Georgios? You know. Probably about the same. But I keep returning to it. There is such a thing as the soil link to the blood. My mother is buried close to me.
Right, but how many between
so
the both of us?
Yeah.
Between the both of us, how many countries have we been to? I've been to 37.
Fuck, my passport, both of them now.
Let's say what? I mean, but between the both of us, we've been to
probably 60 countries together.
I've been to 37. You've probably been to 1170. 11D.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I want to point out too.
Cold Warrior, yes, the Indian Ocean does count, and so does Egypt. He just wrote that, brother.
But one of the things that I want to point out is that when you talk about the 1%, okay, and I mentioned this the other day on a subject, and it was very hard for people to understand this. So I was gifted. This is the best way I can describe it. in my gene pool, I was gifted with extraordinary strength of tendons. That's just it. That is one of the gifts that I was given. It had nothing to do with anything I earned. When my mom and dad got together, that DNA that came together was just an absolute gift. As a result,
the fucking epic Greek genetics from hold on, you got to tell everybody the island they came from, because that is Thermopylae. And
well, it's I come from an island called Icaria, which is where Icarus fell from the sky. But here's the thing that I point out. I deadlifted 705 pounds off the floor. That puts me at the 0.06 percentile of the population. Less than, a little bit more than half. Like I said, very few people have been able to do that. Here's the issue with it. When I try to explain to someone that at my age I can still pull 450 off the floor, very few people can do that. So here's the outlier. If the average person tried to pull that off the floor, they would break blood vessels. But as a result, when they start,
their intestines might come out their asshole. We've seen that happen before.
Right, and here's the issue with this. When people are talking about, at the extreme level, this is one of the difficulties is understanding, because you can't explain to somebody what it's like to be in combat. I don't know what the number is today, and you can correct me, but I think it's less than 1% of all of Americans. I don't care how you put it. Less than 1% of all of Americans are combat vets. I don't know if that's correct or not. I know that.
Yes, that's correct. It's even though we have a volunteer army, which is what all countries should have. I am a fan of the draft in one way, and you can please edit me if you think it's wrong. I do think every male and female that's willing should serve, but the draft only for males should be implemented, and it's so they can at least see the world, and if they become liberal or conservative or whatever, they at least have knowledge of the rest of the world. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and I agree with that, and I think, but again, it goes back to it one of the problems that you have in why people come up with, they come up with some of the crazy conspiracy theories, is because they can't, for however you want to look at it, they don't know how to explain it. They don't know how to explain it. So, like I said, they got to fill it in with something.
There's something that Cold Warrior just wrote, and Jermaine Arminius. I'm going to bring you up to speed on both of the chats. First off, Cold Warrior, 2 years obligated service for all, no waivers. And that means if somebody can't serve in the military, they can be a police helper, they can go and be an ambulance driver, they can, there's a lot they can do. This whole thing where we could have BASs, battalion aid stations, with people who learn basic skills, and are able to give people basic aspirins or whatever to people. And then the other one is Jermaine Arminius, question to George: what is the view of Germany in politics? And that was his question, and I will shut myself down for those 2 questions to be answered.
What is the view of what in politics? I'm sorry, the last term?
That was Jermaine Arminius. what is the view of Germany in politics? He's from Germany, so he had a mistyping, but it's fine. I understood.
What do we think about German politics? One of the things is that I think the opinion of the people I've talked to is that that Angela Merkel is sold out to the globalists, and I think that they because of the lack of following immigration policy. I think that's if that is the question that he is asking.
I know it is. He's just saying, what's your view? Because he hasn't heard you explain about it, brother. And my view of Angela. And I
think honestly, I think I don't know. See, I'm not as familiar with their background, but here I have family in Germany. By the way, they're in a place called Singen. Singen, and they make some of the best schnitzel over there. And here's the thing. My view, and from what I've seen, is that their current administration, especially Merkel, she's a globalist. The idea of open immigration and taking in refugees, I understand it. I understand that it might be. A while back when the birth rate in Germany was low, I can understand it, but today I think that you're diluting you're diluting the workforce, and I think what you need to do is take care of your own first. And Poland is having the same way. Hungary is the same thing. They're saying, listen, we can't we're having a hard time taking care of ourselves. Why are we letting people in from other countries? And it's the same thing that happened in Italy. Now, I'm not one of those. I'm not against. I'm against, Nazism. So that's not where I'm lying. Here's the thing. I think the problem has become is that we think that all cultures are equal, and they're not. And so if you want to take a look at the contributing factors of a culture. Take a look at who's won the most, look at the people that have contributed to the Nobel Peace Prize and who hasn't. And I think you've got to understand that countries succeed because they have an ethos. They have a policy that made them great. And then people forget it because it's too easy. And that's my view on it. I
think you just answered Jermaine's question. He said, great, George, but positions. And from what you were saying is exactly the problem, because societal, how do I put this? Social deconstruction of the West is afoot. That's on a very fair tier on the truth, and you know this, and so do I. And Merkel is sponsoring from who? We know the game. Puppets. That's from Jermaine Arminius. And
well, here's I'm going to say this to you, and then I got basted when I posted this. But here's the thing: when you weaken a culture, and it doesn't matter what culture it is, okay? It doesn't matter what culture it is. Pick one. It doesn't matter which one it is. When you dilute a culture, it becomes harder and harder for them to stand up to the people in charge. And every leader, I haven't seen a leader yet that doesn't think they're going to keep power. No one. When they're in charge, when the Democrats are in charge, they think they're going to keep power. When the Republicans are in charge, they think they're going to keep power. Everybody that's in charge always thinks they're going to wind up keeping power.
No, and I've seen a difference, and so have you.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's Trump and Bolsonaro.
No. We're talking about two different things. We're talking about.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that when there's no one that I have seen that has said that they will abdicate power easily. So if the Republicans are in charge, they don't ever think that they're never going to have a say in in the next movement, in the next round. It's like everybody said, even, the king is. Go ahead.
Now we have to admit something. Pinochet in Chile. Pinochet, absolutely. He took out the communists. That was what he did. And what was it? 3,500 people died over that because they were communists and they were trying to dilute the country. And that's a fact. But here's the funniest part that nobody wants to talk about is at the end, what was it, 8 years later, he held an election and he allowed it, and he took the repercussions, and they voted in a more liberal government. And see, there's so much stuff people don't want to talk about, but the truth is the truth. And they'll always say he's a fascist, a Nazi. No, he wasn't. He was a man who corrected his country and then left. No different than George Washington, in my opinion.
Well, I'll give you a prime example. I'll give you the prime example. The first person did it is Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus is a prime example. The Order of Cincinnati, when he was. I mean, if you want to take a look at that, here's the problem that I've seen today is that people, leaders are very hard to identify. You can't identify a leader. You know a leader. I can't tell you what you can't tell me what leadership looks like. But it's one of those things that it is, you just know when you see it. And
I'll
the problem
bullshit on that because you do know, and I know what a leader looks like, what a mentor.
Yeah, you know what it looks like, but
Your
could you
father
describe
was a leader and a mentor?
But could you describe it though?
No, I can't. I can't. It's a feeling. It's a heart thing.
And so can you? I can. I'll give you a prime example. I can't describe how good Schwenkbraten is until you actually have them. You can't describe it. You can try, but you can't really. You can say that's the reason I'm not a vegetarian. But until you actually have them, you can't actually, understand it. And I think that's a problem with things that are the difference between a conspiracy and a theory.
That is so prescient. Germain Arminius said this, so I'm going to bounce into your conversation for a second. We give a damn of puppets who have no license to that ship. Our word to that is the folk will rise again without any religion or agenda, any ... and point of view. We have enough, and that comes from Germany.
Right.
I didn't mean to hijack your thought. I was just trying to say.
No.
He's saying the same thing you are, brother, except in broken English. And when I had him on my show, his English is perfect. So
what I'm saying about that is that the fact that is that I will, not everybody has the ability to be critical of thought, and it takes a certain kind of it takes a certain kind of thinking to be that. And I think one of the issues that we have with all of us, and it doesn't matter where it is that sometimes you have to suspend disbelief. Like when you go to the movies, you have to suspend disbelief. You have to say, yeah, I mean, the laws of physics in a movie don't apply.
Yeah, you have to have a willingness to suspend disbelief. Yes, I understand.
And the problem with when you take a look at some theories, you know, what some of the people, the reason that some theories abound is because it's just like, you know, whatever people want to say, oh, you know what? I know something you don't know. And it makes them feel special, makes them feel connected. Well, that's great. But when you ask them, when you see a company that gets outed because something they did wrong, and I'll give you a prime example. This is something that happened a couple years ago, and people say, well, how the hell could she get away with it? There was a company called Theranos, okay? And their CEO was a lady by the name of Elizabeth Holmes. She got caught for cooking the books and, you know, stealing to the tunes of like 400, 500 million. I mean, it was, you know, and here's the thing. People say, well, wait a second. How could she get away with that? Because she knew exactly what people wanted to hear. And she knew the pattern. Yep. And this is what I was saying is she didn't do it this wasn't a conspiracy done underground in some company that was in, whatever, in Hurricane, West Virginia, but she raised like $500 million. And people were like, well, wait a second, how did she get away with that? I mean, because she got investors, because she knew the pattern of thought that people look for in that industry. So in 2017, a company called Fortress Investment Group gave them $100 million. Well, why did they give them to them? Well, because she had the pattern that they were looking for. And that's one of the great things about conspiracy theories and why they take hold, because they have the pattern of what people are looking for in order to attach themselves to it. Now, I don't know if I've explained that well, but I hope it
No, you explained it perfectly. And what I'll say is, I can put it down to an even baser level. I remember one time on a stakeout, listening to Art Bell interview a female who was a, what do you call them, an embalmer, whatever.
Right.
And it wasn't her she was talking about, but she had known about people who had the predilection to get busy with dead people. Okay?
Right.
And he said, well, are women involved? And she said, yeah, it's a wonder what that spray mechanism does to different appendages. And, you know, what she's saying is women were bouncing, you know, necrophiliacs were bouncing off those dead dicks. But the whole thing that brings us to focus is when, you know, this hashtag, which I like to call, remember that was the pound sign when we were young, you know, pound on the phone. It was not a hashtag. So the Pound Me Too movement, they're all fucked up. And the reason why is because they don't realize they invite it when they invite it. Once a girl strips down, and now they have this whole thing where you have to ask permission for this, that, and the other. That's bullshit. Men and women both have that drive as young people, and you know this. And once they have that drive to procreate, that's why that happens. It's a God-given thing. Or the gods. It matters not how you believe in things. But it is something that exists and females want to absolve themselves. It was so funny with the whole song, "Baby, It's Cold Outside." Back in that era, and even in our era, you know how many women would not want to say, "Yeah, I'm good with it. Let's get busy." No, they'd be like coy, and it was a game. It was what women did, so they didn't feel disgraced the next day. And it really saddens me that we're actually negating humanity by these different movements. And your thoughts?
Well, I think what you're doing is you're diluting the message in order to be able to accommodate everybody, and you can't accommodate everybody. It just doesn't work that way. You're diluting the message, and that's what people. I think that's the problem that people have, is that they want to dilute the message, and then they wonder why it's not working. And I'll give you an example, and because I've got to log off here in a few minutes, but they diluted the rules on judo, and I'm just going to use judo because I teach judo. I'm a judoka, and they diluted the rules to a point that when you watch some of the matches today, it doesn't look like classical judo, and they wonder why they lose. They're losing certain fans, and the point is, well, if you can't do what the rules originally were set up to do, it doesn't look the same. So I've argued with people about what something is supposed to look like, and then all of a sudden, these people are going, well, whoa, that's not correct. And
no, it's even better than that, and I can tell you how I can explain it. I'm not a judo guy. You know that. I took kung fu.
Right.
You have given me knowledge on a lot of different things. Instead of going forward, going backwards.
Right.
It's a difference in style. That's what we're looking at right now. Is that we are looking at a difference in style, but what do we? And I think this is the point you're getting at. And I hope I'm being honest, and everybody understands what I mean. The difference in style, i.e., "Baby, It's Cold Outside," judo, you can learn from both of those, and it just boggles my mind, and I don't know how to clear this up other than to say, George, you're a hell fellow Womat. We have been brothers since, I was 12, 13?
Yeah, since Reagan was president.
Yeah. And
so with that, I've got to call it a night, but it's always a pleasure having you on, Semper Fi. And one last thing I will always say is that by far the best Schwankburten I've ever had has been in Singen, Germany.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason I'm not a vegetarian.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, but before you do that, I know where you're about to go. Plug your book. Plug your podcast.
For those of you listening, we host Veteran Radio Syndicate, and I do a show called The Bear News every Sunday night on Facebook. So, and I've had you on numerous times. And with that, I bid you a good night. And Jermaine Arminis, I bid you a good night. Thank you for the kind words, sir.
Hey, I love you. You know.
All right.
I'm going to let him go, and I'll finish for a few minutes. With that being said, you've heard Georgios. He's a good man. Please tune in to his stuff. When he wants to put out his book name, please look at his book. He has lived an epic life. And that's the truth. So, with that being said, thank you for taking a seat on my big orange couch. All of you. And thank God I have a small channel because I can still fit you all in. And drink your tea or coffee, your adult libations if that's what you want to do, and enjoy. That's what this is about. Nothing more. That, and for my son to see, and my grandchildren, hopefully, to see who Grandpa was. So, with that being said, I will exit out with the same music from Axion's Ghost. Please like, comment, and share on his stuff. He is a phenomenal artist. And y'all gotta get his music. Alright. Much love. Shuff out.